I Hate Politics is a podcast about a human activity we love to hate. I'm Sunil Dasgupta. April 27th, 2023. Climate activists Tim Martin and Joanna Smith walked into the National Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C. and threw red and black paint on the enclosure and the base of the famous Degas statue, The Little Dancer, as an act of protest against climate inaction. They belong to a group called Declare Emergency, which has been resorting to disruptive protests for the last few years, including blocking traffic on roads and highways to raise the alarm about the dangers of climate change that threatens the earth and a significant part of human civilization. They were arrested. Joanna Smith pled guilty and got a 60-day prison sentence as well as fines in 2024. But Tim Martin did not make a guilty plea, and his case was heard early this month, April 2025. I visited Martin on April 2nd, just as his trial was beginning, at the Steinbrook Center Hostel, which is part of the Luther Place Church on Vermont Avenue in Washington, D.C. And against the background noise of communal cooking, serving, and eating, I interviewed Tim Martin about climate action in this moment. You may have seen videos of drivers trying to run over climate activists blocking traffic, and social media anger over protesters inconveniencing those sitting on the fence. But we know from the study of protests that inconvenience is what moves people, maybe not out of sympathy, but anger. We also know from the study of protests that successful protests are really hard. Stay with us to find out what happened at Tim Martin's trial.
I Hate Politics is brought to you by UMBC's Political Science Program, where you'll learn to shape public policy, impact communities, and function at the center of modern society. Learn more at shadygrove.umbc.edu.
I Hate Politics is a podcast about our neighborhoods, workplaces, schools and streets, and our local governments as they function in diverse and democratic societies. This means our politics are messy, dirty, sometimes corrupt, with often self-serving politicians. But no matter how much we may hate politics, we are never exempt from it, even when we refuse to participate. In fact, the purpose of politics is to keep society functioning, precisely when we don't agree with each other, like now. Music for this episode comes from CatScan, an art pop rock band from Washington, D.C. Paul Chaperas on bass and vocals, Kevin Kingsley on guitars and saxophone, and Mason Shelby on synths and percussion. Their latest album, reflecting the time and this cultural moment, is called Everything is Normal. To feel better, go see them live. You can find out where they are playing on their Facebook and Instagram pages. If you have difficulty finding them, we share their events on I Hate Politics socials. Tim Martin, April 27th, 2023, you and Joanna Smith went to the National Gallery of Art and threw some paint on and around the Little Dancer, Degas sculpture, and you were arrested. Your trial started today and it goes through the week. Now that you are at this point, how do you think about it now? Are you repentant? Are you defiant?
I went into action two years ago. At the time, climate scientists were saying things like, we have a closing window in which to stop the climate emergency. Like Sir David King at the UK's former government science advisor said, we have 3 to 5 years to act. And he said this in 2021. And so I was working on that assumption that what I did might have a chance to start a conversation if somebody like me, who is like from a architecture background, engineering background, somebody with a society trust to look after public health and safety, right? As a double licensed design professional. If I went into the museum and did this action, maybe people would take notice. What's going on, Tim? What's wrong? As a licensed design, people trust me with the roof over their children's heads, for crying out loud. So I'm making a mess at the museum. What is the matter? Can we talk about it? And that did not happen. Nobody wants to talk about the climate except for people who are already aware.
Why do you think nobody wants to talk about the climate?
2 years ago, I thought we had a chance to turn around this climate catastrophe. If we all got together, like they said in the movie Breaking Boundaries, The Science of Our Planet, at the end of the Breaking Boundary film, Johan Rockström, arguably Europe's one of his top climate scientists, said, if we all got together like we did in World War II and pulled our resources across the fields, and remember, this was when the auto industry stopped producing cars and started making weapons to fight the war, right? We are in a war for survival. And the idea is that enough people wake up, we can step up together and change this horrible thing.
But you changed, you abandoned that view.
What has happened since was one of the United States' top climate scientists since the 80s, James Hansen, came out with a paper called Global Warming in the Pipeline. By the time you get done listening to the analysis of the paper, you realize that there's already so much carbon dioxide or carbon pollution, greenhouse gases. It's not just carbon dioxide, but it's the methane and the nitrous oxide and all the other greenhouse gases, the heat trapping gases that are already in the atmosphere now. Like, as if we stop burning fossil fuels overnight, miraculously, we are still stuck with this blanket of greenhouse gases. The Earth energy imbalance has doubled because of the...
So you're less hopeful now, is that correct?
It's a different kind of hope. It's a hope where you let go of winning and you let go of control of what's going to happen, because it's going to happen. Nature has already spoken.
Among the things that James Hansen talks about is that he wants to seed the stratosphere with sulfur. Do you think that's a viable way to fight?
I don't know about this technical solution, because whenever we have a problem and we fix it with a technical solution, it always creates another problem we didn't think about.
This is true, but the analogy is that in the early 1990s, a volcano went off in the Philippines, and the ash from the volcano went to the stratosphere, and then that brought about several years of actually global cooling, right? And I'm sure people that follow this closely do it. And so using that as a template, Hansen has suggested that if you put sulfur in the stratosphere, it would reflect the sunlight away, and therefore allow the Earth and the people that live on it some respite. What do you think?
We have to try everything, but we can't even have that conversation because the information is buried. We have people in high power who are frustrated that we haven't had the human progress that they expected when they were young from Star Wars and Star Trek. Where are my flying cars? Why haven't we? Why haven't we?
Are you talking about Elon Musk?
The whole family of tech billionaires, Peter Thiel, and that genre of thinking, if you will. It's a mental illness based on never enough.
I don't know if Peter Thiel and Elon Musk came up with never enough. We had the Gilded Age 100 years ago. Max Weber wrote a book called The Protestant Ethic and the Spirit of Capitalism. And he identified Calvinism in particular as a driving force for capitalism. The temptation to grow, the necessity to grow. I mean, that you would see probably in the affluence gospel. It's longer.
Growth sounds good, doesn't it? Children grow, plants grow, but and the economy wants to grow.
Are you a votary of this idea called degrowth? Degrowth is the idea that we can grow forever. Do you think degrowth is a viable idea?
If I was to design an economic system based on ecological design principles, I would do what nature does and account for the true cost of doing business. And I feel like capitalism comes from colonialism, which never paid the true cost of doing business because they relied on free labor or cheap materials. It was all about buy low or somehow consume and then make a profit and then return that profit into the growth of capital and markets. And I'm not anti-market because we've had markets as long as we've had civilization. And at a certain point, the concept of growth, for growth's sake, becomes a mythology that's unhealthy and it's leading us over the cliff. What the ecological economists say, that we can mature the economy like a healthy organism, like in nature, back onto that curve, and live where everybody has what they need to live a dignified life. It is possible if we redistribute. There is enough for 10 billion people on the planet, and that sounds really good, doesn't it? We don't have to talk about population.
Clearly, they haven't figured out the mobilization part required.
How to implement. Yeah, well, look at what we're up against. We're up against empire around the world, the panorama of control, of public narrative, of government, nation states are all reporting to central headquarters, right?
There is a central headquarters?
Absolutely.
Internationally?
Well, what is the Atlas network, if not a central network, central headquarters? It's over almost 600 organizations, all highly calibrated to the same public narrative, to say things that the corporations and the governments can't say, but they can say. They can say things like, let the individual have freedom in the market to make the innovative decisions and solve and give us progress.
You think there is a conspiracy here?
I wouldn't name it a conspiracy, and if I said conspiracy, I probably meant to say mental illness or something. I feel like we're listening to very unhealthy stories about a mythology of growth and a way of living as if the real actual reality of the means of our life, the fresh air, the clean water that runs through all of us, that we all need, has been objectified, commodified, forgotten. Like, why is it that a forest is worth more cut down for materials to go into this GDP-based economy? There's something pathological about, it's almost like a virus in a healthy system. We have become the virus by the stories that we tell ourselves.
What were the stories you heard that led you to become so activated?
Personally, I couldn't stand the trees getting clear-cut in my city of Raleigh, the city of Oaks. The developers are allowed to come in and do whatever they want in the name of progress or gentrification.
What year was this?
It was spring of 2021. No, 22.
We see trees and the death of trees as traumatic, but we don't often relate it to the larger action in terms of climate change. Bill McKibben wrote his book on climate change in 1991 maybe? So we have known about the issue for a long time, but it takes you until 2022 to sort of become activated. So my question would be, in the last 20 years, were you at all aware that this was happening?
For me, it was ecological design principles as a grad student in college in 2001 when I graduated, and then 20 years of trying to implement design principles in the work in a way that buildings give back to nature more than the take.
And you knew all of this from graduate school.
Well, the Living Building Challenge started in 2011, 2012, and became a thing in the late 2016s. And I went to my first Living Building Challenge convention in 2019 in Seattle, and I saw the world's greenest office building, and it looked like my final project in school. I was like, yeah, this is great. Here are all the principles. Here they're actually doing it. And then they told me how much it cost. And my heart broke, and just
How much did it cost?
5 times the going rate.
So it was not doable in the economic sense.
No, only if you happen to have, $1 billion. And guess what? The Bullitt family had a dynasty of timber industry. So, if the future is wealthy people who made their money off pillaging and destroying the environment, come back and show us how to be sustainable, like the Google campus. The Google campus in California that just opened is a model workplace, and nobody's even talking about how much it costs because it's just skyrocketing, enormous. I couldn't find the budget yet. So what it's telling us is that we are free falling, and there's these fantasy fake green examples to help us feel comfortable on the way down.
What would you like to happen?
Nothing short of revolution, but peaceful revolution.
If you got your revolution, what would it look like? How would you organize the economy?
I don't know exactly, but it would look a lot like a healthy forest ecosystem where everybody's gifts, we all have gifts because we're human and we come from a long lineage of evolution, right? We're like the sort of finishing touch of symbiotic relationships.
Outside of an analogy, how would the economy run?
If solutions grow from place, then that means political solutions come from citizen assemblies in neighborhoods that scale out into regions and neighborhoods and cities, and then states and nations, and then international.
Congress is an assembly.
What if we just, but they don't respect human rights.
So I do admit they don't do that. But it is the truth is that it is an assembly. The county council that is in my county is an assembly. The state legislature in my state is an assembly. By your measure, they don't listen to people. If you create a new assembly, how would you make sure that they listened to the people?
There's probably not a political bone in my body, but I have friends who are political wizards.
At this moment, you are trying to change the world. You took paint to a well-known statue in the National Gallery of Art, and you sought to create awareness about climate action through those means. The Washington Post has said...
Not protesting, not active.
And so how do you distinguish yourself from vandalism?
I would say it's all proportional and relative to, a government that is holding the global south, like half the world's population, enslaved for enriching the global north. And that's not fair, and it's violence, and it's not right, and I'm not going to
By that measure, throwing paint on a statue is not even proportional, right?
Exactly.
But so what more would you do?
What would I do next is probably go to the global south countries where they need help and try to make amends for the harm that I've caused. I've contributed to the harm.
What does that mean?
Well, my friend Suleiman, who lives in the Gambia, which is within Senegal in West Africa, where sort of the slave trade started, the first ports that crossed the Atlantic, I gave him money that I got from my mom's tobacco law settlement, and I'm helping him have a job because they can't grow food anymore because it's so dry, and they are impoverished. He sent me pictures. I don't know how. I think it was LinkedIn. We got connected, and I just feel so honored to know somebody from halfway around the world who can share their life with me. He took a video and introduced me to his family, and I've been.
You're going to visit him?
If I could, I would like to, and he would like to visit me, but I know that costs money, and
and carbon.
Yeah, sure. I cannot afford to continue to help his family, but I can fight for system change where the global South can develop because we owe that to them. Because we've literally created poverty in the global South.
Your compadre in this, Joanna Smith, she pled guilty. You didn't choose that path.
I turned down the government's plea offer over a dispute about the statement of offense. They wouldn't come clean and accurately state what we painted. When you turn down the government's plea offer, it means that you're not agreeing that you're guilty, and so you have to take that question up in court. Yeah. And it's a very narrow question of guilt or not, of doing damage, and so the question in the trial is hinging on the definition of injury to museum property. The government's saying that we injured property and we did damage with a capital D. And if you read all the news articles, everybody thinks we actually damaged the sculpture, even though there's zero evidence of damage to the sculpture. She's in the same condition.
You poured the paint over the pedestal.
Yes, on the pedestal and on the protective case. And when they calculate our sentences in the beginning with our grand jury indictment, they use the value of the sculpture to calculate the sentence. And so out of the 30 points that we got...
What is that value?
Well, 9 years in jail.
No, what's the dollar value that they associated with that?
Oh, the value of the sculpture.
Which is what?
140 million or something.
Oh, okay.
Right. So if you put that into the sentencing guide calculation,
right.
It runs up the sentence,
sure.
Of course,
sure.
Which is ridiculous, and all of our defense attorneys were like, this is ridiculous, and they ask, the prosecution to be like realistic, and they're like, sorry, my boss's boss told me I gotta do it. They didn't say that, but that's what's happening.
What would you do? What would you like to see? If you don't want 100 million barrels of oil a day, where would you like it to be? Zero? How do you get from 100 to zero? What is that vision?
I don't know, but I think we should all be talking about it for starters, and I think we could figure it out if we all got, if we shared all of our gifts in such a way, like in citizen assemblies, in the indigenous wisdom, if we balanced our rational, critical problem solving right left hemispheres with our intuitive connections making, big picture connections, what wisdom of our left hemisphere, and we did that in balance, and we did that through the diversity of human communities, and we listened to nature, and we did all these ecological principles, and maybe we would have a chance.
But do you think that this kind of abstract way of imagining and envisioning the future is what is causing fewer people to join you?
This is the problem of exponential growth over the last 2 seconds of our 55-year human lifespan. We are so off balance and lost as a species, and we've magnified our adolescence and our childish way of moving through the world with technology and all of these benefits that we call progress, which is actually just digging our hole deeper. If we really wanted to take ourselves to the next level, we might actually need to operate and to evolve at the time frame that we come from. Instead, we're going too fast and it's too soon, and any solution that we could come up with as these adolescents, wrecking the planet right now, is probably going to be inadequate.
So we don't have the time, and fixing it will take time. So how do you resolve that?
Well, with friends, and you enjoy the time you have, and you try to make the world like you want to see it, maybe. Like you show up for each other in community, and you recognize each other's preciousness.
In my county, the county government reported that the median price of a home is $615,000.
It's a fantasy, isn't it?
And that the trend line in the next 5 years goes to $900,000.
Of course.
So, in fact, we have a housing shortage. You talked about trees. When you want to house these many people and do it cheaply, how can you protect trees and house all of these people?
I would say let's focus on community space and less personal space. Like, why is it that houses, the average size of a house has gone from 800 square feet to 2,000 square feet? I would argue that less is more.
I think that is an argument that has been made for a long time, except that it hasn't resonated.
Why hasn't it? Why are we getting sold stuff that we don't? We live in a world that has to grow, and people have to buy stuff that they don't need. But they're told they're less than unless they can keep up with the.
Who's telling them?
It's the system. It's the advertising and the economic
But
decision
you don't
makers.
have to believe it. I mean, I think we have.
Well,
You don't think we have free will?
I'm not a psychologist either, but I've read Gabor Mate's The Myth of Normal, or In the Realm of Hungry Ghosts, and it talks of he's a trauma and an addiction expert psychologist, and then he writes about it. He works in high risk communities like in Vancouver, I think, and.
But we live in big houses because we have some.
We have some addiction to consumption to make up for the trauma.
As a practical matter, given the cost of housing and the need for affordable housing, right? Obviously, making smaller homes would be absolutely the way to go. But you can't force people into into smaller homes. What does that transition look like to you?
It looks like starting with the truth, that we can't continue to live, the ways we're living are unsustainable and they're violent. And if anybody wants to survive on this planet, then we have hard choices to make. And
do you think people don't know that?
Yes, I think that we live in a matrix, a bubble of fantasy land. I mean, the true costs of what we're doing and what we're doing to ourselves, nobody is, I think a lot of people are oblivious. And you can see because...
And you know the truth.
I listen to the science. And
the others don't listen to the science?
The science is distorted and they've been working on...
But you listen to the science.
I listen to...
You know what I'm trying to say is that why is it that you have the message and nobody else does?
My head. I'm not advocating that I have all the answers. And I certainly wouldn't want to be given that much responsibility. But since you ask, I would love to start with the truth of how our thriving species has broken 6 of the 9 planetary boundaries that are responsible for the health and safety and stability of life on Earth.
If it is so dire, why didn't you go after the sculpture itself and just the case?
I didn't know it was that bad.
What do you think the worst outcome of the trial is?
There is no worst outcome. In the context of what we're facing, what's ahead for humanity, the fact that nature is going to squash us.
Could you go to prison?
Like a bug. Going to prison is the least of my concerns. If the jury finds me trying to be helpful and sympathizes with me enough, chances are they could nullify the case.
Sure.
This guy committed the crime, but the law doesn't apply because he's just trying to help. And look how bad things are. And now the government doesn't even believe in climate change. So we gotta free him and let him go back to work. If that were to happen, I would go back to work and maybe what you're talking about, something more effective. I don't know. We'll figure it out. But chances are I'm going to be found guilty by the jury because...
And then what happens?
I go to jail. I mean, the sentencing happens 3 months later and the judge decides my punishment.
Do you have a sense of what that punishment would be?
There's a range, yeah. For the crimes that I would be found guilty of, has a 5-year maximum on the conspiracy and a 5-year maximum on the damage or the injury to museum property. And if you add them together, the lawyers tell me that equals 5 years. And I'm like, what? That doesn't sound as much as 10, like I saw. They said, well, if you conspire to do this crime, you can serve that time consecutively.
Right.
So, okay, I'm learning. And something about a fine that maxes out at $250,000, which is more money than I even have. So I don't know what they're going to do, but they can try.
Well, are you going to do a GoFundMe?
I don't think they deserve it,
But are you going to pay? I mean, if you have a fine, you have to pay it, right?
you mean after I get out of jail?
I don't know how this works.
I can maybe they
I
can
haven't been in jail.
They can let me work it off.
Yeah, I don't know.
How many years would it take to make 250,000? I don't know where all this is headed, but it gives me a great sense of spiritual grounding and satisfaction. I can at least look my kids in the eye and say, I tried.
Tim Martin, some of the most famous civil disobedient leaders wrote their best work in jail. I hope you don't go, but if you do, that's the plan.
Wouldn't that be nice? 3 meals a day, exercise, fresh air, and lots of
And write a book.
paper.
Good luck in the trial.
Thank you so much.
Climate activist Tim Martin was found guilty and awaits sentencing in DC jail. He reports is already too hot in the jail and his sentencing is scheduled for late August. That's all for this episode of I Hate Politics, where we aim to stem the decline in local news by working with community voices. Don't forget to tune in to our Tuesday morning news analysis. I Hate Politics is produced by me, Sunil Dasgupta, with support from the University of Maryland, Baltimore County. I direct UMBC's political science program at the universities at Shady Grove in Montgomery County, where, among other things, we explore and learn about politics, government, and society close to home. Music for this episode comes from CatScan, an art pop rock band from Washington, D.C., Paul Chaperas on bass and vocals, Kevin Kingsley on guitars and saxophone, and Mason Shelby on synths and percussion. Their latest album reflecting the time and this cultural moment is called Everything is Normal. To feel better, go see them live. You can find out where they are playing on their Facebook and Instagram pages. If you have difficulty finding them, we share their events on I Hate Politics socials. If you want to share your music on the show or know someone else who might want to, please email us at producer@ihppod.org. I hope you will subscribe and share the podcast as we bring you stories about politics close to you and to your home. See you next time.